It's one of those games where I don't have to talk about a game that you missed. It's a game you all saw. The question is, did you see all the little things that we've seen? Did you see all the little things that we've seen? And I will point out, again, this is not – I hate giving score predictions. My score prediction was 20-17, Chiefs would win. And my logic behind it was one team has Pat Mahomes and Andy Reid, who have been there, done that, won that before, and the other team had Kyle Shanahan, who everyone thinks of as a very good head coach and excellent play caller, and Brock Purdy, who had never been there, never done it before. Now, is it really simplistic to say, well, that's really the difference? Sure. And sports and life is a lot more complex than black and white. Right? It's a lot more complex than black and white. But I do think that at the end of the day, there's a difference there. It's totally unfair to say, on third down, Chris Jones comes unabated as the offensive line, somebody screwed up protection, and he's unabated. And, Brock Purdy kind of had to throw it away. But he did have Brandon Ayuk open in the end zone. And, again, if you make that quick read and you see there's no safety there, you got to trust your guy to go make a play. Or maybe it's if it was 4th and 4 and the Chiefs had the ball, would we have expected the Chiefs to go for it? Or maybe that this is the biggest difference in playing against the Chiefs now as opposed to playing against the Chiefs previously, where I don't remember there being any discussion from Tony Romo about whether or not you go for it instead of kicking a field goal in overtime, right? Kick a field goal, take the points, play defense. Now, look, part of it is San Francisco's defense is really good and had played well in the game. There's two things. The defense is really good, didn't play well in their two previous games. Played well yesterday. But would ever before this year, would you ever go 3 points is enough? Not against Pat Mahomes. Generally, it's not. We only advocated for 3 more points when the Lions were up 14 to make it from 14 to 17, not 0 to 3. I thought it was a good game, not great game, a great and exciting finish. And the reason that people establish reputations as the greats of all time or greatest of all time is what we saw Pat Mahomes do, not once but twice, which is move the ball down the field, kick to get an overtime, kick in overtime, and then move the ball down the field, win down 3, and get a touchdown. But I thought Andy Reid's preparation, guys knowing the new overtime rules, going over the overtime scenarios where San Francisco didn't go over them nearly as much. I thought that helped. And then you got to at least tip the cap to the Chiefs in they ran the same play to win the Super Bowl 2 consecutive years. Didn't love the halftime show. But Tony Romo stepped on Nance's final call of the game-winning touchdown. That's to be expected. I thought Brock Purdy, he didn't play poorly. He made some good plays. It's really hard to determine what his level is because of how they play. They are so committed to the run, with the exception of the start of the second half when they weren't. I did think that as they marched down the field against the Chiefs, and they ultimately settled for a field goal in overtime, I was surprised they didn't run the football once they got in, closer, inside the 40, why they didn't run the football more there. But overall, it was a very good football. It was a close football game. It wasn't a great watch, but it wasn't because it was poorly played. Part of it is, as we told you all week, you get all these people that are tweeting all these holding, pass interference, things that weren't called, whatever. I told you, they don't want to throw penalties in the Super Bowl. They do them if and only if they feel like they have to. And the Chiefs end up winning the game by 3. Beyer, you were there. What, Greenlaw appeared to tear his Achilles tendon. That was a crazy play and one that I thought hurt the Niners down the stretch. Deebo Samuel, although he played after it, seemed to tweak his hamstring. There was muffed punts all over the place. Wasn't a cleanly played game from either side. Mahomes did throw an interception. Wasn't an arm punt, but it was somewhere in between a costly one and an arm punt. And I didn't hear it mentioned late in the broadcast, but the blocked extra point did end up making the game go overtime.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot there, and I want to at least start with the Greenlaw injury, because this is one of the things. Well, everybody wants to be at a Super Bowl. We didn't see it happen because, why would we, right? Guys are just running onto the field. You're not sitting there focused on, wait a sec, did he just run on the field and get himself, injure himself? They're not replaying it on the Jumbotron. That's not what the NFL is going to do. They're not going to show an injury of, a guy running onto the field to play defense being hurt. So it was one of those things that, as you're also following social media at that time, and no earpieces, by the way. I know that's very inside Super Bowl, but Doug, you know what I'm talking about, where you could listen to the broadcast on your ear. None this year, so you didn't even have that advantage. It wasn't until social media really picked up on what exactly happened to Dre Greenlaw. I think that it did play a role, but there are other bigger things. The Brock Purdy conversation, with everything that you laid out, Debo ended up getting hurt in this game. They, for some reason, went away from Christian McCaffrey. George Kittle was a non-factor except converting a fourth down when they needed it. It was a big play, but he only had 2 catches the entire night. And
he was hurt, by the way, and I know you can't see that way. They actually did. That was one thing that I thought Evan Washburn did a good job of doing on the sideline, was tracking that injury. They tracked injury. So that's one thing.
That's the part of it, though, of when you have this Purdy conversation, when you have where you want to put Brock Purdy. And I'm middle on the road. We talked about it last week in Vegas, right? I said I think he's good enough. I want to see if he's great enough. When people wanted to put him up at the MVP level, they would always poo-poo saying, well, he's got all these great guys around him, right? He's got Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle. No, he's it. Okay, well, let's take away some of those pieces.
Right.
Now what happens?
Right. He's just a
guy. And that's what you saw, I think, again, juxtaposed to what was going on the other sideline. When you do have Patrick Mahomes, that's why the Purdy MVP conversation was so silly. And it doesn't mean he's not going to be an MVP 10 years down the line. It doesn't mean that he's not going to be a better quarterback next year than he is this year. But let's be honest on who he was and what he was. You're right, he wasn't great last night. Made some great plays. The pass to Juszczyk to avoid, the pass rush and roll out and throw that down. Great plays. But when it comes down to it, they put the game on his shoulder in the third quarter. The offense didn't do anything. They kind of went away from Christian McCaffrey at that point. And I think this Purdy discussion, for all of the Purdy haters out there, they got a lot of ammunition from last night's game.
Yeah, and I'm with you as well. And I don't think he'll be I could be wrong, I don't think he'll be an MVP candidate. I don't know how long he'll be the starting quarterback there, right? Because the way it works with all these things is, it's like eventually you're going to have to pay him. And when you pay him, like, how much you're really going to pay to keep him. And once you pay to keep him, you're going to have kind of what Pat Mahomes had, right? Where you're going to have that there'll be a year where it takes away of the salary cap. Like, I don't know he's that guy. As opposed to Kyle, and I do think Kyle borders on arrogant in that he thinks, and he's right, like, kind of anybody can be good in that system. Obviously, it takes something else to be great. And maybe he's the perfect fit for now, but he's the perfect fit for now based on how much he makes. But you're absolutely right, and that's the biggest point is, and I said this about Lamar Jackson before his AFC Championship game. Like, Lamar didn't play well, didn't play great, and made some errors in the red zone. It wasn't his fault that they fumbled at the 1-inch line. Not his fault. But the way in which this deal works is, especially because Lamar did have ample opportunities after that fumble, you either do or you don't. It honestly, it's one of the reasons that Josh Allen has avoided some of the criticism, because with the 13-second game, like, he literally played a perfect game.
Yeah.
He played a perfect football game, and his defense just couldn't stop anybody. His coaching staff didn't help him with the 13 seconds. Should have won the game. We can't say that about Brock Purdy. And, this is totally unfair. Chris Jones comes running in unabated. Okay? But there's two things that you probably would guess would happen if Pat Mahomes was the quarterback. One, you'd think he'd probably sidestep and still find a way to throw that ball.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? The second thing is, well, on 4th and 4, they would have gone for it. And you don't do that with Brock Purdy because he's relatively inexperienced and will play to our strengths and our defense, whatever, and they're not great offensively. So I'm with you.
He also, and they ended up scoring on a great pass that he had to Jawan Jennings, but also on that same drive, he overshot Debo, which would have been a surefire touchdown.
Yes.
And missed him bad. And maybe Debo's hamstring was a reason why he missed him so bad, but it was there for them, and they didn't get it. Now, in one of the notes that I made of, Brent Musburger, mark it down. At that point, I'm like,
yeah,
they don't get this touchdown on this drive. That's a big point. But he was good last year. He wasn't the biggest problem, that they had by any means. But it was a collective effort, and I think that conversation, I think the Shanahan conversation as well, is one that is going to linger throughout this offseason. But so much was about Brock Purdy and where he was, and then you see what Patrick Mahomes does, and now I think you kind of got to feel silly to think that people were putting him in the same class.
Here's Brock Purdy on the missed opportunities in the Super Bowl.
I think that's what eats at me is I feel like we had our opportunities, man, to, I think, sort of lap them and get up on them, and I think we failed to do that. So moving forward with my career, and, if you get blessed enough to get in this kind of position again, I think you have to understand that, and I learned the hard way. The first thing that comes to mind is just like when you have an opportunity like we did, to really, put some points up on them and take it, you got to take it, man. It's a Super Bowl. We got a good team in the Chiefs on the other side, and I think we had opportunities to do that, and we all fell short of it.
Here's Kyle Shanahan on his game plan.
What I can't live with is when I do stuff that I didn't plan on doing or that I didn't do and second-guess myself. And I'm proud of what we did today as a coaching staff and as players in terms of we worked and we did everything that we planned on doing. We just didn't get it done. And any play that didn't work out, you always look at that stuff. But that's how every game is.
It's an interesting way of looking at it. He's saying his process was good. The results just were not.